Welcome to Father and Son. G'day, Tom.
Morning, Dad.
Tuesday morning again. Well, as we say, a week's a long time in politics. We were speculating last week about whether there'd be a change of leadership. I thought there would, and you thought there wouldn't.
No, well, I'm amazed. I mean, I was doing the drive show here in Melbourne on 3AW last week, and there wasn't much news around. All of a sudden on Wednesday night, things started happening in Canberra. As we now know, Gillard has been appointed by the factional warlords of the Labor Party. Yeah. I don't know if you saw Bill Shorten on Q&A last night.
I missed it.
He kept going on, no, it was the right thing for the party. And Barnaby Joyce was on, and he just kept saying how you have sacked an elected Prime Minister, which is what the Labor Party's done. Yeah. They did this to Bob Hawke back in '91, but they've never done it to a first-term PM. And the big issue now, of course, is, Gillard suddenly has got this popularity in the polls. She's a new leader.
She's got to have a honeymoon period.
Will she call an election?
I'm certain she will.
August, I think.
I was talking to the previous president of the Labor Party, and he said, well, Prime Ministers call elections when they think they can win.
Mm.
Now, her best time to win, if she can win, is now because she's got the honeymoon period.
Well, when you look at what can happen, I mean, September's out because of the football.
Yep.
You get the finals and then the grand finals, so that's the whole month.
November's out because of the Cups, early November.
Yeah, you don't want to get too caught up in Christmas.
You've got August
or October.
And October. I think she's certainly go in August.
I would have thought, because the honeymoon period, I doubt will last more. Typically it goes for a couple of months, and that encompasses August. So if we have an election in August, it'd be interesting because Julia Gillard is sort of going at great pains to distance herself from all of Kevin Rudd's policies, even though she was the deputy leader and therefore should be plenty of responsibility.
Yeah, well, that's what the Liberals are going to have to keep locking her in to all the scandals we've had, whether it be the education one, which she was totally responsible for, all the overspending. But the bit that I don't understand, I can't see her sorting out this mining tax, because I don't think the companies will agree to anything when there's a big chance that if the Liberals win, we know there's no mining tax. And I agree with you when we were talking earlier that they've got a bit of bargaining power now, and if she does win, she may say it's a mandate. But if the mining companies support an amended resources tax, they are giving the Labor Party a big opportunity to win.
They are. Look, it's a difficult choice for the miners, you're quite right. If they continue their attacks on the government and thereby maybe help the coalition win the election, then there's no tax whatsoever. However, if they think that Julia Gillard is sufficiently popular, especially if she calls an early election and she's going to win anyway, the best bet they have to get a modified tax, but modified in their favour, is to do a deal now. They're putting the pressure on. There was an announcement this morning. I think Andrew Forrest, the head of Fortescue, has said to Julia Gillard, you've got 2 weeks, otherwise we start the ad campaign again. I think Marius Kloppers and Tom Albanese, who heads Rio, are being a bit more conciliatory. My view is, I think it's 50-50 if they'll do a deal on the tax, but they run the risk if they don't do a deal and Labor wins, which is probably a likely outcome, that the original resources super profits tax will be put in, and that will be very bad for the mining industry.
I don't think it will, because that would be stupidity on the government's part.
Well, with an election win under their belts and a mandate from the people, anything's possible.
I think what's more likely to happen is they'll modify the tax. The mining industry will say this is better, but it's still not good enough.
Go to the people.
Go to the people. Then if she gets the mandate, she'll, well, that's what I'm going to put in.
That's the modified tax. And if the coalition wins, then there's no tax.
Yeah. So I don't think the miners will agree before the election.
The other thing Julia Gillard said, which was interesting, she came out and said she's not in support of a big Australia, which is direct contradiction to what Kevin Rudd was saying just weeks ago.
More people?
More people, yes.
No, so she changed.
Well, the country's the same physical size no matter what the government does, unless they invade another country. But suddenly that means cutting back on immigration, which is odd, given that she is a migrant herself.
Yeah, it is a bit odd, but I think, again, I think what she's doing is quite clever politically. She's trying to diffuse the resources tax, diffuse the whole issue about how many people we should have in the country. She's trying to diffuse most of the things so that when she comes around to the election, they can talk about the 1 or 2 things that they think they've done well, like the health reform, which in my view is still not much.
No, and in fact no one understands it anyway. Look, I think she'll be happy to win this election on the basis of I'm Julia, I'll consult with the community, and therefore it'll just be steady as she goes. And I reckon if Gillard does win, you'll end up with a federal government that's a lot like some of these state Labor governments we've seen, where they just go on for year after year without actually doing anything. And people think, oh, that's all right. I mean, here in Victoria, people still go on about what Jeff Kennedy did. Like him or not, he did a lot in 7 years. Yes. Can you name anything Braxton and Brumby have done in 11 years of being in government? And the answer is, not really.
Well, the interesting thing is if they have an early election, it will help the Liberals in Victoria, I think, because there'll be a reasonable distance between the federal election and the state election.
That's another reason you don't want to have it in October, November, because you'll be running up against the state election.
Yes, and in January there's one in New South
Wales.
But it'll help Ted, I think, quite a bit. If Julia wins, I think that's going to help Ted win. Now, Gary Morgan, I saw the other day on one of his blurbs he puts out, he thinks the opposite, that if Gillard wins, it'll help Brumby, but I don't think that's right. I think people like to vote,
well, it's hard to say. We saw the by-election in New South Wales recently. It was a huge swing to the Liberal Party.
The Labor government's out of power there.
Look, I'd say the Liberals are odds on in Victoria to win. I still think it's less than 50% federally. I just think Gillard is saying and doing all the right things, and being a woman, I think it probably helps. On Talkback Radio, I've heard several women who said they were Liberal voters, but they would vote for Julia Gillard because she was a woman. That is the height of stupidity, but I think a lot of people will do it.
It's interesting the way the polls have gone. The Labor Party have recouped about 5% of their vote, but it's all come from the Greens. It hasn't come from the Liberals. The Liberals is pretty firm at 40%. So, and I don't think the Greens are going to give the preferences in the same percentage. That's Gary Morgan saying that as well. Now they got 80% at the last federal election. He thinks it's down around about 60.
Well, maybe the other interesting thing, of course, is speaking of the Greens, Lindsay Tanner, his resignation from Parliament was overshadowed last week by the leadership spill. Of course, his seat, the inner seat of Melbourne, was under threat from the Greens. Now, it's probably more under threat now. Whoever they get to replace him, I think is going to have a harder job because he was a very well-respected local member. And I think it's unfortunate he'll be leaving the Parliament because
he's one of the better ones.
One of the more capable people, actually from either side of politics, to be honest.
I agree. All right, well, Joe Hockey's predicted on the email this morning that Julia Gillard will call either this weekend or next weekend, and I think it is about as imminent as that.
Right.
So we'll look forward to seeing you next week, where we'll have more news and we'll be following the election right through until it is over. Thank you for watching.